Our scriptural passage today comes from the Gospel of Matthew. It is the same gospel that we heard a week or so ago when Christ explained to his apostles the parable of the wheat and the weeds. And what he shares with them is that there is a landowner who had a field and planted good wheat in that field. And in the night, a thief came and planted weeds amongst the wheat. And Christ explains that the field was the kingdom of God, and that God had planted within this kingdom good wheat, which is us, the children of God. And in the night, a thief came and planted weeds amongst the wheat. That thief in the night was Satan. And the servants of the landowner asked, as they saw when they saw the weeds and the wheat in the same field, should they gather it up and throw it away and start all over again? And the master, the landowner, says, no, allow the weeds to grow amongst the wheat, and at the end times, at harvest time, we will gather it all up and separate the wheat from the weeds. And the wheat will go in its proper place, and the weeds will go in their proper place to be burned. Now, this is the end times. Christ explains to his apostles and says that those weeds will be burnt, and those are the people and who have not embraced the truth of Christ and the truth of God, where there will be wailing and gnashing of teeth. And that's a very frightening thing to think about, even to consider. When we are separated, and if we are separated from God, there certainly will be this horrible, terrible moments that last eternity, and where there certainly is this frightening ideal of the separation from love and goodness and kindness. And that certainly is times and moments of eternal wailing. But as we look at the field and consider ourselves to be the wheat, and when that harvest time comes, we will be rewarded for being the wheat in God's field. But, the truth is there's a little bit of wheat and a little bit of weeds in every single one of us. And it is our responsibility to nourish the wheat and not the weeds. It is our responsibility to make certain that the wheat is watered and grows and nourished, and where then there will be no room for the weeds in our lives. Because the truth be told, when we are living in this world, there is temptation that causes us to embrace the weeds that might come as a part of our falling. Weeds like pride, weeds like ego, weeds like greed, weeds like sexism, racism, all of those things that separate us from the love of God. For when we hold on to anything that separates us from the love of God, then that's weeds. Those are the weeds that are in our lives that we must separate ourselves from. And so that's why we go to church, to be amongst the rest of the wheat that sometimes is tempted by the weeds. We gather together so that we can be wheat together, and we can go out into the world and to share the nourishment that we received in our faith. And that's the idea of the wheat and the weeds, to recognize there are weeds within us. And it is our responsibility not only to take care of our wheat, but also to be wheat for others, to be nourishment for others, so that their wheat grows and the weed fields fail. You see, all of us have this within us. And that's what the church and what God and his sacrifice was all about, to bring us the wheat, to bring us the nourishment, to be growth, to be watered, to be satisfied with what God has to offer us. And then every single one of us can be the wheat in the fields, and ask every one of ourselves in every moment of the day, Lord, what are we going to do today? Nourish our wheat